Hey guys, it's your Peacekeeper coming at you with the answers to the questions that you guys asked in our 1,000 subscriber video. In the 2 weeks since I posted that video, we've gone up a whole nother 100 plus subscribers. So thank you guys who just joined for joining, and thank you guys that are already here for making this channel what it is right now. If I haven't said thanks enough, thank you. Alright, so let's dive into some of these questions. We got a handful of them, which is about perfect for the length of this video. Nathan Guy asks, if I could command any ship from the game in real life, what would it be? Well, there's a number of good, solid choices to answer this, but I'm going to have to go with the New Mexico. Yes, the USS New Mexico. The USS Iowa and USS Missouri were very close seconds, and USS Colorado a more distant third, but the New Mexico's long history is just as storied as the Iowa's, and the ship has just this sweet classic design that just stands out, and you can pick them out of a whole lineup of ships just so easy by the way that they look. And besides, you've got 12 of these massive menacing guns, boatloads of armor, amazing AA, and this bitchin' ranging clock on the front of it. What's not to like about that? I just am disappointed that none of these ships survived the war in a real method that we could go and tour them reasonably well. And that kind of upsets me, but ultimately I think the USS New Mexico has to be at the top of that list. Madman X100, what is my favorite line of ships? This is a good question, and while all of my favorite ships seem to be in the US Battleship line, it's not my favorite line to play. That honor actually goes to the Japanese destroyer line, and for those of you who listen to Spectre Mage, call me a weeaboo or insert whatever derogatory term you want to throw in there. It's not because I have seen Can Cole, it has nothing to do with that. The Japanese destroyers have a distinct element of skill that's required to play them to their max, one that I feel that I need to really work on, and the skill required just to get successful torpedo hits while also utilizing those high alpha, low rate of fire guns, it just makes you a better player amongst all of the lines. And, of course, probably my favorite aspect of them is that their stealth allows them to be very trolly in their playing. I control people so easily with them, and I get great enjoyment out of making people turn into my torps. That's probably my favorite thing to do ever, is to shoot at somebody right before torpedoes are going to hit and get them to open up to those torps. It's so much fun to do that, and they do it so well. The US destroyer line is really good, and you know, I really enjoyed playing them, but they just don't give me the same sense of satisfaction that the Japanese destroyers do. I also kind of have a soft spot for them because in terms of stats, people seem to think that they are just absolutely these most awful ships in the game, and they need all of these buffs, and even after the split, people are still saying it, and quite honestly, I think those people are full of crap, and I love proving them wrong. Sorry if you're one of those people, but I don't agree with you. Madman X100 also asks, what do I think wargaming should do to bring carriers back in line? Well, I actually get asked this question quite a lot, and I'm not a CV player. I don't play carriers at all. But I think that the obvious solutions to these problems are to remove all of the differences from them currently in the game. Make all the carriers' loadouts exactly the same, give them all the same exact number of loadouts, so if we're going to have air superiority strike and balanced, both ships currently on both nations need to have that same exact loadout. They also need to have the same size squads, and they need to be given the same number of squads for each loadout. Once we've gotten there, we can start to tweak these quote-unquote national flavors by making the Japanese torp bombers do more damage than the US torp bombers, and US dive bombers do more damage than the Japanese dive bombers. We could figure out something else for carriers, for the fighters for the carriers afterwards, to make it so that they are more skill-based as opposed to being, you know, RNG-based, which is very frustrating to work with. That's a good start. And from there, a realistic assessment of any aircraft on ships can be done. Right now, your anti-aircraft on your ship is this aura around your ship, and when a plane enters that, it starts dealing with this RNG factor where if you're above a certain percentage of the plane's hit points in terms of damage per second from those AA guns and that aura, you have this percent chance to shoot the aircraft down. I just don't think that that's a real effective or realistic way to represent that. And it takes away some of the skill in carrier gameplay, because no matter what side of, like, say in Iowa, you're about to drop torpedoes on an Iowa, no matter what side of it you come from, you're going to take damage from all of those 5-inch 38 caliber guns, where in real life you'd only take maybe half at most, you know? I think that we could add a little bit more skill to carriers to make, you know, the skills that you develop there actually work for you, where, you know, like, every class has skills, but carriers seem to be kind of watered down in this regard. And the problem with that is at the high end, when you're super really good with them, you can do a lot of damage, but on the low end, it's very frustrating. Well, if we started making it so that if you could approach a battleship, say, or a cruiser from the front, to minimize the amount of anti-aircraft guns it's got coming at you, I think that would help out make carrier gameplay a little bit more interesting, a little bit more tactical, and really make them far more enjoyable for people to play. Whereas right now, I just... Also, it add an element of skill to recognizing what side of a ship is damaged. You know, if you get raked with HE in a battleship, you lose all those light caliber and medium caliber anti-aircraft gun mounts. CVs could then take advantage of that. Lapband Bob asks, what do you do to improve the aiming of your guns and torps? Or what do you recommend to improve the aiming of your guns and torps? Well, I'd say that the easiest way to improve your aiming of your guns and torps is simply time in the ship that you're struggling with. That's probably the best thing, you know. If you're new to the game, it can be a little frustrating to do lots of damage, and, you know, you see all these guys posting these massive damage games, and you want to do that. Well, the way that those guys are getting to that point is they are learning every single trick that you can do for one of those ships in the game, and they are maximizing the usage of all of those little tricks. And the only way you're going to get that is you can watch videos and you can try and implement them, but the only way you're actually going to get that is by practicing it, time in the ship. What has really helped my gameplay out, though, is I spent a lot of time after the U.S. Battleship tree. I mean, I ground through the U.S. Battleship tree twice, once in closed beta and once right after the launch in open beta. And after that, the next line that I went down was the U.S. Destroyer line. And to be honest with you, if you can hit something with the 5-inch 38s on the Nicholas and up, you can hit with just about any gun in the game. So if you're looking to improve your gunnery, I definitely recommend picking up like a Farragut. That's a pretty solid ship to practice in. If you can hit consistently with those guns, shouldn't be a single gun in this game that you can't hit well with, because honestly, the arcs on those 5-inch 38s is terrible. And that will teach you a lot about angles, shooting at angled ships, trying to get hits on the angled ships, and the best part is the rate of fire is fast enough and the damage output consistent enough that you can get real good positive feedback from those engagements. So that's what I would recommend for gunnery. Now for torpedoes, pick yourself up like an Umikaze or a Wakatake or a Isakaze and really practice with the torps on those. You would be surprised at how the low-tier Japanese destroyers really force you to concentrate on lining up your torpedoes and planning your attacks and doing all that. I just can't emphasize that enough. Their torpedoes, you know, especially at the low tiers, you get a lot of practice. You get practice at all the ranges, and the reload is quick enough that you can actually use them all the time, whereas you get to the higher tier stuff, sure, you get more powerful torpedoes and sometimes more torpedoes, but your reload is slower, so you find yourself not using them as often. Those two things right there will help you out a lot, so that's definitely what I recommend. Lapman Bob also asks, what's my shoe size? 13 wide. Everett, oh god, I'm gonna butcher your last name, Everett. Grope? Will there ever be any other games on this channel? Well, the end goal is certainly to add more games. It's a gaming lounge. We're here to talk about games, but right now we're building the channel off of World of Warships. I feel like there's enough of I don't want to call it a market because I'm not selling any product, but there's enough of an audience within the World of Warships community in the YouTube space for it isn't so saturated with all these big names in YouTube that I can build the community around that, and then we can progress on to other games as they happen. If you remember, I used to do the I used to do the Let's Play series for Factorio. I had to stop because an error in the game corrupted the save game file, and I couldn't recover it. And I plan on starting that up again. My problem is, right now, is I just don't have enough free time to consistently play multiple games and try and produce content for it. You know, you guys are really great about viewing all the World of Warships content, and that's where the overwhelming majority of the player base or the viewership comes from. And I want to continue to produce good videos for you guys, especially since we've got so many lines of ships still to go on the How to Play series. I could always produce more epic battle videos. There's just a lot of room there for more content in World of Warships, and that's really where my focus is at right now, because like I said, you guys are predominantly the ones that are viewing the channel, and I don't want to also forget everybody else either. So my goal is to go back to those other games that I've played and put on the channel, but ultimately right now it's a little difficult to do that just simply because of time. Dawson Ostergaard, which BB line do you prefer, or which one do I like the best? Well, obviously that's going to be the US Navy line. Why is a little bit more complex. I really enjoy the German Battleship line, don't get me wrong. The problem with the North American servers meta, the way we play the game, is we're a little bit more rangy and standoffish, and it's very difficult to play German battleships to their max. They're very good ships, and when you have a team that's willing to push with you, it is a lot of fun to be in one and watch those secondaries just go a-flying. The problem is that the vast majority of games that I've played in them, that's just not been the case. And ultimately, I just don't enjoy going into a game doing, 45,000 damage or 60,000 damage and secondary hits and main gun hits and then dying because nobody wants to support you. And, well, that's unfortunately the reality. The US battleships, though, they offer a much better mix of things. The low tier stuff all the way up to tier 7 is a very good mid-range brawler setup. You've got lots of armor, pretty good maneuverability, great defensive capabilities, and the guns hit like a freaking freight train when they hit. And that to me is a far more enjoyable playstyle for battleships. Japanese battleships, I don't particularly care for the quote-unquote sniper role or that medium to long-range role. That style of gameplay doesn't have any risk to it in my mind, and I don't find it nearly as enjoyable. In fact, and as far as tier 10 battleships go, I actually play the Montana better than I play the Yamato, even though the Yamato is by far a much better battleship. That should tell you a lot about how I play this game. There also happens to be a lot of really cool history in the US battleship line, and that's not to say that there isn't cool history in the German and Japanese battleships line. There certainly is, but it's far easier for me to access the US battleship line stuff because the US did so much to document and preserve that history, whereas some of the other ships, like for instance the German battleships, a lot of those ships that are in the low tiers are all World War I ships, and they only lived through World War I and then were either scuttled or sunk or scrapped. The US battleships, well, the tier 4 through tier 7 were all built around World War I or before World War I. Most of them served in World War I, were refitted and then served in World War II, and then were either scrapped or used as missile test beds in the case of the USS Mississippi, a New Mexico class battleship, or they were nuked, the New York and the Arkansas. I mean, there's just so much cool history there, and the design of them is so cool and fascinating to me. I'm sure if there was much better history behind some of the other battleship lines, I could probably get into them, but right now it's definitely the US battleship line. Mr. Zemlin asks, I hear you are into auto racing. What kind is it, and what is your role? Well, I am indeed involved in auto racing. I currently own and operate the Cone 502 Racing 2015 Mustang GT that participates in the Sports Car Club of America's autocross events in the area around where I live. That sounds really fancy and technical. The reality is Cone 502 Racing is a bit of a joke. It's not an actual race team. There's a long joke about that, and I can go into it at a later date, but we're not going to get into it in this one. Autocross, to oversimplify it, is basically an amateur form of motorsport. You take a parking lot, lay out a course in cones, time it from beginning to end. That's a gross oversimplification of it. It's far more complicated than that. But it's a lot of fun, it's very accessible, it's inexpensive, and while it's really an amateur motorsport, there's a lot of professional race car drivers like Randy Popst or, I would forget his name. Randy Popst is probably the most notable one, but there was, first name is Brian, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyway, there's been a number of guys that have gone from the amateur side of autocross and gone into professional racing. Like I said, Randy Popst is probably the most famous. And it's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's accessible. As to what I do everything. I drive, I maintain the vehicle. It's also my daily driver. I upgrade it, I clean it sometimes. And you name it, I do it. And the last big event that I participated in was the 2016 Tire Rack Solo Nationals. The big show. It's the largest amateur motorsport event in the world. There were 1,315 attendees, and I finished 18th out of 39 in my class, and like 325th overall, although that number is kind of skewed because it rained for a lot of people's runs. It takes place over 4 days, and you get 2 days worth of runs. It's 6 runs in total to put down your fastest time, and your fastest time from day 1 on course 1 and your fastest time from day 2 on course 2 is added together, and that's what your difference is. I was only a second out of the last trophy spot in my class. Anyway, I'll throw a link down in the description of this to the YouTube channel that I have that has all those videos on it. Skystalker asks, Poi. Yes, indeed. If you don't know what that is, No Zoop For You Gaming has a very interesting video that's at least gets you on the right track. I can explain that when we get to Shiratsuyu in the Japanese how to play videos. Ace04 asks, do you have any long-term plans for the channel? Yes and no. For the most part, this channel is my hobby. It's something I do for fun. I don't do it for money. I don't do it because I'm getting paid by other people to do it. You know, that's not a motivation for me. This is something I do for fun. I'm playing the game anyway. Doing the video editing is a lot of fun for me. It's something I do. But it does require a considerable amount of effort on my part. And it all comes down to what I have time to do. There are some things that I'd like to include. Obviously, I'd like to grow the channel more. Duh. I'd like to add additional games. Duh. I would like to do game reviews. I would like to do gear reviews, keyboards, mice, monitors, etc. I would like to do computer setup videos. There's a good possibility for that. I would like to also interview you guys. And I'd like to get in with games with you guys and post those up here. Ultimately, though, it all comes down to when I have time to do it. There is no time frame to add any of this stuff in there. And it basically boils down to what I've got right now is what I have time to maintain. The Z Battles montage series, the How to Play series, the Epic Battle series. I've got some other series coming up that I think will be beneficial, a torpedo aiming, some videos on how to do that and gunnery stuff. That'll help out some of the newer players, as well as some of the older players, because, sometimes you just don't think about some of the things that get brought up. But those videos are the bread and butter right now, but they're also only what I have time for. Now, if I end up getting more free time to do stuff, I certainly plan on adding more content to the channel. Anyway, those are all the questions that you guys asked. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, and thank you guys for watching.